I have cable in my bedroom. I don't have cable in my living room.
Well, what I do is I use something where I have the Xfinity app on my TV. So I have cable, but I don't pay for all the boxes. I just use the Xfinity app.
I don't think I could do that.
No, it's still the same. You have the guide. You have everything. So it looks exactly the same. I'm with you, though. But
it's tougher. Yeah, I have cable in my bedroom. I don't have cable in the living room. We have YouTube TV, but they just watch YouTube. They don't watch, like, the ratings for the Super Bowl were down, and said, yeah, because no one has cable. Everyone's watching. I watch the game, but I don't have cable.
Yeah, I know. I hate seeing the ratings numbers.
Who? The streaming numbers are up. Yeah. So, all right, let's bring Jason Fitz in. He's the host of Spain and Fitz right here on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, you can hear him at 7 o'clock right here tonight on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, he, like all guests, appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Jason Fitz, welcome back, man. How you been?
Man, I'm great, and I heard what you guys were just talking about. Funny thing that a lot of people don't realize. Before I left the music business back in, let's say 2016, we did a survey of how kids were consuming music, and the number one way, even back in 2016, that kids were consuming music more than all others combined was YouTube. I grew up in an MTV generation. Well, that's what kids are doing now with YouTube. They just make their playlists. They create their own MTV. So for all of the Spotify's and Apple Music conversations, YouTube has actually been, at the forefront of it. It's part of why I love working in digital for ESPN, is because there's a big part of me that believes that in 5 years that stuff will be every bit as important as what TV is now.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the show now. You can watch the show. See, now we have a picture up. It just says on the phone, ESPN radio host. But a lot of people now watch our show live digital because that's, we were just talking about that. You can watch our show on YouTube. I said, all these kids in our house, they don't go to cable, they don't go to YouTube TV. They go right to YouTube and watch everything. It's just crazy how, and that's where sports are going, is that everything is just digitally now.
Yeah, well, and to that end, I mean, Mike Golick Jr. and I hosted an NFL pregame Super Bowl show, and they cut off the best moments in Super Bowl history, and last time I looked, that had about 3 million views digitally. So you're absolutely right. Like, you can pull these huge numbers with digital content because there's so many people that even if they're watching the game with their friend or they're watching the game at the house, we've reached a world where everybody has multiple devices at once. So even if they're not always paying attention, if they see on the whether it's on their phone, on Twitter, on YouTube, on their phones or whatever, they click in and they listen, and it's amazing. It makes outreach incredibly possible, as opposed to what it was a few years ago. So I love that portion of it.
Well, let's get down and dirty now, because Carson Wentz's name is at the top of all the trade lists. But there are reports here locally that trade partners have been unwilling to meet the Eagles' trade demands for Carson Wentz. How are you reading, Jason Fitz, about how Howie Roseman's playing this? And by the way, he's probably the most hated sports figure in the entire area here. So people want this guy gone. How is he playing this Wentz thing?
Well, the problem is, this is a game of chicken constantly, right? And at some point, if you're the other organization, what I always tell everybody to do is flip your fan hat to the opposite side. So let's say that all of a sudden Carson Wentz was the quarterback of the Washington football team. What do you think then his trade value would be? That gives you a much, because it's so hard when we have our own fan hat. Like, as a Raiders fan, I'd love to sit there and say, Derek Carr's worth 3 first-rounders. He's obviously not, but I've got my fan hat on, right? So, the problem here for the Eagles organization is the more public and loud this gets, the more everybody knows that a deal has to be done. The more everybody knows a deal has to be done, the more people are going to lessen what they're willing to give up in exchange for Carson Wentz, because all that's going to happen over time is this situation is going to get worse for Philly, and it's going to get worse for the team. So you're just going to bank, if you're another GM, that the toxic environment created by a very public trade demand and the quarterback that has a difficult contract situation is going to allow you to pay less. So I think one of the things everybody has to do is just throw away the Jared Goff trade. It included the number ones, and everybody's talking about how impactful that'll be for the Rams, and using that as some Matt Stafford to the Rams as some litmus test for everybody. But it's really not. I mean, part of the reason that 2 number ones were given to Detroit was because they were offsetting the fact that Detroit was agreeing to take on Jared Goff's contract. So it wasn't a Goff contract trade, or a Goff trade, I should say. It was a Goff contract trade, and they had to pay up to get that. So, in my mind, as much as I know Philly fans want Carson Wentz to be worth multiple number ones, I don't think he's going to be in this market because nothing favors the Eagles.
How do you compare Wentz's value to Sam Darnold, Deshaun Watson, Jimmy Garoppolo, the others that are available when you weigh the risk-reward situation?
Well, let me say this first and foremost. If I was the GM of the Eagles, I'd run it back for another year with Carson Wentz and see what a change in environment does. Anytime you've seen some level of greatness from a quarterback, I believe that then you have to look at it and say, how do we repeat that? There's got to be a way. There's something magical in the air. How do we repeat it? We've seen Carson Wentz play at a really high level. So that's what I would do. Now, when you talk about his value, I mean, there is not a team in the league not named Kansas City or Tampa Bay that shouldn't be looking at Deshaun Watson. I mean, that's just fair. Deshaun Watson, to me, has already shown he's a top 5 quarterback in the league on a trash organization. So, if you told me that my beloved Raiders were going to give up their first-round picks for the next 4 years to get Deshaun Watson, I wouldn't even blink an eye. I mean, I'm all in for that. That's how good I think Deshaun is. So I put him in a separate tier. When you start talking about the rest of them, I mean, Wentz to me is better than Garoppolo. We haven't even seen sustained greatness from Garoppolo. We've seen sustained from Garoppolo, and that's about it. So, I would put Wentz in a much higher tier than Garoppolo. And Philly fans, change for breaking up with your girlfriend just to try to date somebody else that might be crazy is not always the best thing in the world here. So, Garoppolo he's not a supermodel. He's more like the crazy girl that you think you're going to fix. I'm not into that. So, I think Wentz is a higher tier than Garoppolo by far.
All right, you're a Raiders fan. If Wentz was traded there, let's just say they swapped him for Carr, how would you feel?
I wouldn't be happy. I think Carr's undervalued. I like Wentz, but I think Carr's undervalued. That's change for the sake of change. You're just burying yourself into a new situation. So, I think those are sort of the same head-scratching quarterbacks where you might have your guy, you might not have your guy, and they've got a lot of life left in front of them. I wouldn't love that move, but I'm also, admittedly, I'm a big Derek Carr fan. I think if Carr goes to the Colts, Carr's a Super Bowl contender. If Carr goes to the Patriots, he's a Super Bowl contender. He's just the franchise of the Raiders and the Raiders fan base has been, let's say, less than enamored with him. But I don't think that's a reflection of Carr. I think that's the reflection of unrealistic standards. Like Raiders fans have forgotten about Jamarcus Russell, apparently.
Jason Fitz, Spain and Fitz tonight, 7 to 9, 97.3 ESPN. And all right. I want to get your take on the Super Bowl because I think you and Golick Jr. were talking about this the other night about having the officials' grades, almost like PFF has for the players, doing that for the officials because that game was overtaken by the officiating, even though, I mean, it was a lopsided game, but, man, it felt like there was yellow flags flying from all angles.
Yeah, and I've been, ever since I was a podcast nobody had ever heard of, I've been championing this idea. So maybe now it's starting to get a little momentum because Junior and Kirk Morrison both really liked it on the after show. Yes, I think that we should have 100% when they tell you at the beginning of a broadcast who the officiating crew is, underneath there should be a score. And, for everybody that doesn't pay attention to this, the league grades officials every week on the job that they've done. And through that process, that's how they select who works the Super Bowl. So that was, in their mind, the absolute all-star crew, the best graded crew of the year. They had some calls that I thought were absolutely questionable, but we've learned to accept that a quarterback completing 70% of his passes is incredible, right? Which means we've learned to accept the fact that a quarterback incomplete 30% of the time is acceptable. I think we would have better understanding to the job of officiating if, in fact, at the beginning of a game, they'd say, here's your crew. And by the way, this crew has scored at a 87 this year. And, so that they've gotten 87% of their calls right. And over time, while that might be jarring in the beginning, over time, I think it would get everybody a much better understanding of what officials are doing that's good and bad. Why not make that public so that we know? And then, obviously, just like if you're a fan of, let's say, the Jags, you're probably going to get the worst broadcast team. You're also going to get the worst officiating team, and you'll see it at the beginning of the game, and you'll know what to expect. So, absolutely, I think the league should do it. And the Super Bowl certainly was taken over by some calls that were questionable and in some ways bad. And I don't think it necessarily changed the outcome of the game, but it's just another bad look for the league.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that it changed the outcome, but it definitely ruined it. Second quarter, all the flags, it was a mess. But I do want to ask you, was Andy Reid's legacy hurt by this loss at all, or is there somewhat of a asterisk next to this because of the offensive line play?
I think that there's a big, we have apologized more for this Super Bowl loss than we ever do for somebody that gets blown out in the Super Bowl. And I think that speaks to how much we respect not just Patrick Mahomes, but Andy Reid and how much a love child Eric Bieniemy has come for everybody. Everybody seems enamored with everything Chiefs, and I understand it. They've looked so good. I picked them to win in a blowout. I was wrong, but absolutely, I don't think that his legacy is hurt by this one. But I will say this. If this turns into a habit, I mean, we've seen 7 of the 8 quarters in the Super Bowls that Mahomes has played. He hasn't been spectacular. And I don't think that that's any reflection. There's context around it. He had no offensive line. But if they turn around and they don't get to another Super Bowl in the next year or two, or they suffer another loss like this, there will be a sharp and quick turn, because whatever popularity and respect that Andy Reid has, Patrick Mahomes has more. And Reid will become the coach that's not getting enough out of Patrick Mahomes if he has another game like this in the Super Bowl. I mean, just like we look at Green Bay and say, how have you wasted Aaron Rodgers? There is now that if you win 2 Super Bowls with Mahomes, that's never going to become a conversation around Andy Reid. But now that you're 1-1 with also an AFC Championship game lost in there, man, he is teetering on the edge in a year of having people say, has he done enough with the best quarterback in the game?
All right, last one for Jason Fitz. Tonight it's Trae versus Luka. It's 11-12 versus 11-14. Yet ESPN, you guys have a ticker at the top of the screen counting down when that game is going to air. Is that going over the top?
No, 1,000%. Just a reminder how much money we've. Hopefully my bosses are busy right now, but that's all because we've spent so much money on the NBA. We got to hype something, right? And look, I believe that Luka Doncic is such a special player. It's going to be fun to watch his rise, and it's going to be fun to watch him dominate in the NBA for a really long time. But that doesn't mean that we have to make meaningless games meaningful. I think that actually reduces the impact of truly important games. It's something that, if I were the czar of the sports world, I would do much differently. I would actually stand up and say, hey, guys, this game probably going to stink. These teams stink, but watch these 2 players because they're really good. Like, a little honesty goes a long way.
Yeah, that's tonight on ESPN television at 7:30. And by the way, they didn't make us plug that for Jason Fitz appearing today. He did it because he wanted to, and it was a good take from him. And, of course, you can hear more tonight at 7 o'clock with Spain and Fitz right here on 97.3 ESPN. And that's the Sixers off tonight. They're out west. They'll play back here tomorrow. They got the 9 o'clock game 10 o'clock game against the Blazers. We'll have that for you on 97.3. All right, Jay Fitz, appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you guys. Have a great day.